Well, it's 2 o'clock and we're ready to start our webinar. So glad you joined us. And if you're not listening live, that you're listening to the recording. My name is Mark Freier, and I'm the executive coach and advisor to leaders focusing on transformational leadership and the author of the book, The Choice to Show Up, and co-author of The Execution Culture. Over the years, Tim and I have shared literally gallons of coffee and hours of conversations about every topic you could imagine. Most recently, of course, many of our discussions have been around how we are navigating the uncertainty and how to show up well, both personally and professionally. In many ways, you could say we're inviting you into our Starbucks conversations, of course, without the noise of the espresso machine or the interruptions of, excuse me, sir, is this seat taken? It is, however, with the same amount of authenticity and calmness that we want to start. So, deep breath. Here we go. Wow, these times are surreal. I've been pondering a lot over the last couple of weeks the words from author David Kessler, where he writes and says, each of us is experiencing the collective loss of the world we knew. Think about it. Each of us is experiencing the collective loss of the world we knew. I don't know about you, but I think this is worth noting and being honored. So here's the deal. This webinar and next week is not a hype fest to pump you up, nor have we designed them to be a space to wallow or ruminate with our emotions and circumstances. We have a clear intent, and it is to bring to light the science and art of facing reality, how to pivot, and then how to move toward productive action. That's why we've entitled this, Now What? The Path Out of the Pandemic. I've learned so much from Dr. Tim Hogan and appreciated our conversations and certainly our friendship. So welcome, Dr. Hogan.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here with you. This is fun to do this together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm a psychologist and a therapist. As you know, you were on our board. I used to run a big nonprofit counseling center in the city, and now do a lot of consulting and work out of my office in Plymouth. But I think there's two things that kind of summarize what I do. And the first is a term called interpersonal neurobiology. And the reason I use that term is because it makes me sound smart.
Oh, it does.
So,
it does.
Good. So as long as that you got that across. So actually, what it means is it's all about what happens when two people come together and relate. It turns out there's a whole lot of what we call an exchange of energy and information that happens from our bodies one to another. And so people who've worked with me know that I record sessions and watch videotapes, sometimes with the sound off, because I'm very interested in the intricacies of how we interact with one another. We rely on our words, but our words are usually only about 15% of what's happening. So I'm really interested how we do that. And then the other big thing, as you know, is I would say I work in an area called embodied spirituality. So the question then is, as we are exchanging energy and information, what does that have to do with the divine within us, within each other, in the world? Like, how can we be dancing with the divine as we send energy and information with love and compassion and forgiveness and strength and fierceness? And then how do we exit that and, bring death in that life? So that's kind of where I live my life. That's when I'm traveling, that's usually what I'm speaking on. And it's, of course, the way I'm processing what's happening with the people I work with and the consulting I do now. Bond. And so, when moms have babies, their amygdala limbic system is just on fire. When teenagers fall in love and become irrational people who are impossible to be around. Not that I've ever experienced that myself or with my kids, but when that happens, the amygdalas are lit up. That's also the part of us, though, that even in subtle ways, you walk into a room and it makes us want to go over to our partner and give them a little hug or kiss them on the forehead or just kind of snuggle up. That's all limbic activity. But the other job the limbic system has is to scan the environment for threat and then get us ready to fight. And so it kind of signals to the lower part of our brain to release adrenaline and stress hormones so that our muscles get tense and we're kind of ready. So it scans for threat on the one hand and seeks love on the other hand. So the problem is it can't do both at the same time. So, as we've both talked about, we get in our office, we're doing our work, we're looking at our 401ks, we're looking at financials, I'm working with clients whose lives are falling apart. And all this is signaling threat, threat, threat. You know, I
Mm.
look out my window here in downtown Plymouth, there's not one car, not one person, which just feels like some kind of epic disaster, which this is. And my limbic system says threat, threat, threat.
Mm.
So then, um, you know, I leave my office and I talk to my suite mates, or I talk to my family, and I have this brain that's stressed out. And I don't mean to be that way, but that's kind of, I think, where a lot of us find ourselves. We have nervous systems that are right on the edge.
So let me ask you a question. So I'm looking out right now at my sub, which is usually teeming with people, kids, dogs, people walking, and it's quiet. There's nothing here. And you said that, you know, you look out and your brain goes, something's wrong. But but really, it can't be that bad. Or do our brains say, no, something is not normal, therefore it's wrong?
Yeah. Here's the trick. Um, there are times when we can talk our limbic system into stress. For example, we can go to a scary movie or something, and we can work ourselves into a tizzy, but we know it's all fake. Right now, see, our brain has all these automated things that keep us grounded. You know, like as long as I know where to get my coffee, and everything's going to be fine. Like, but this has disrupted all of that. So
Oh, got it.
it's a pre-conscious thing. So I look out, no one's out there. I know the owners of all these businesses. I can only imagine how they're stressed. So my brain it's this little squirt of this stress juice into my brain, and it
Hmm.
creates a whole different neurobiology. And then this is what you and I started talking about yesterday. So then I leave my office, or I come out of my office if I'm working at home, and I go to interact with my family,
Got it.
and everyone thinks I'm mad at them or something, right? It reminded me of something. We call it like the leak or something.
Yeah,
There's like,
right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, actually, we teach this pre-COVID that there is
mhm,
something called the principle of the leak. Alrighty. And
mhm,
so at the end of the day, what happens is all of us leak, no matter whether we like it or not. And it has a more pervasive effect than anything we do say. So I can say, no, I'm fine. I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to come home and be nice to the kids or be nice to my spouse. But at the end of the day, that negativity is leaking, right?
mhm,
And it's also unconscious and unintentional, which is
mhm.
really at some level scary because I can try to say, no, I'll just shut down and I'll power through it. I'm smart. I can make this work. But the truth is, I can't hide that because people feel the energy. People
Isn't that
feel that
something?
leak. Is that right? Yeah.
Oh man. And even if you're thinking to yourself, you know, like say you had your good centering meditative yoga thing, time deal, you got your mission statement, not making fun of these things. It's what gets me through my day. And
Right.
I'm absolutely crystal clear on my values and what I'm going to do. Um, if my brain has been washing and bathing in all this stress, when I come out, I just talked with a leader today who just said that his CEO, he keeps saying, I know he's mad at me. I know he's mad at me.
Huh.
And I'm saying, look, he might not be mad at you. He might be a little upset because your company's losing millions of dollars. And
Right.
this guy has never faced this before. I know it's hard to believe, but it might not be about you. But that's okay. What I really want to do is call the CEO and say, look, I get it. You're stressed out, but your people think you're mad at them because you're leaking that.
Right, which is a whole other topic we could maybe deal with next time too, is the role of a
Yes.
leader, right? And what does
Hmm.
that really look like from that vantage point too?
Oh,
Man,
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
is
Well,
really intriguing. Go ahead.
well, and I think, you know, I think what goes along with this principle of the leak is a principle in interpersonal neurobiology we call contagion, which is we have mirror neurons throughout our bodies, and these
Okay.
mirror neurons are always picking up the emotions of the people around us, and it's all pre-verbal. Like it's not we often can't put words to it. It's just what we experience. So you know, if you've ever seen, you know, we essentially have the same brain as other mammals. And if you've ever seen a National Geographic where, you know, there'll be like 600 impala grazing, and
Hmm.
then all of a sudden there'll be a crack, like you'll hear this branch crack as lions approach. And one impala, the one with the anxiety disorder, which all the other impalas are grateful for because they're the ones that always warn them. So the anxious impala goes, and then if you watch that within a second, 600 impalas go, everyone looks,
Huh.
because that's how our brains are. We are wired, you know, we have this individualistic stuff that we think about ourselves as individuals. But you know, we know, we've talked about this. We are so connected with each other that the minute I walk out of my office feeling stressed out, and walk downstairs. Within 3 seconds, everyone is feeling my vibe. And so, yeah, that leak thing, I think maybe one of the most important takeaways from even from our time for people is that,
Yeah.
you know, and they're trying to do all their connecting on social media right now, and then you got parents who feel crummy about their job, and then marriages, which is a whole nother story, because when the brain is in this stress mode, there's very little affection, there's very little closeness, people get impatient, there's very little sex and romance, where people feel like we should be so intimate because we're home 24/7, when it's just the opposite. So I mean, really, I think this is the thing that if we get this right, it could be a game changer for our home relationships and our work.
Yeah, a little bit later, there's a question that came up. Are there other strategies to calm down the limbic system? So we won't do that now, but maybe
Yeah.
we get some time at the end, just kind of think about that. That might be something to look at.
Yeah,
All right.
well,
We do it
and
now.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
we could take a step. Well, I'd love to take a step, because I think about the work you do with business leaders,
Yeah.
and I think, I mean, even without COVID, business leaders, that's one of the main things you work on with them, right? Like, what
It
are you
is.
leaking? That's like 80%
Mhm.
of the story. So, what kind of things do you say to them? I mean,
Yeah. Well, it
where
actually,
do you start with this?
that's a great question. Thanks for asking. It just happened. I was in a coaching session recently, and I said, "So, what do you do when you're feeling anger?" And the person said, "I just shut it down." And I said, "So, okay, so you
Hmm.
shut down your feelings. What do you think people experience from you?" And this person went on to say, "Well, oh, well, they probably experience my annoyance, my
Mm.
frustration, my anger, my demeaning look or snarky comment." And I said, right. So you
Hmm.
can crank that sucker shut and say, I'm not going to let people know. But the truth is, it leaks out. And so well, she said,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do? Stop this leak? I said, no, it's not about stopping the
Yeah.
leak. It's about changing the leak. In fact, I think somebody just pointed on here that they just had a great conversation at their business about a positive leak, and there's a positive leak too. So here's the way I
Mm.
would start it. Number one, and it's the first step of any transformational leader: self-awareness. Like, what am I feeling right now? It sounds so odd, but
Mhm.
what am I feeling right now? And
Right.
for this
And so
person,
that first move is really all about being fully aware, noticing what you're feeling in the moment, and being able to, because you can't start if you don't know what you're feeling. What you're feeling is what you're sending. So if you don't know what you're feeling, you don't
yeah,
back.
here we go again. I know.
All right.
So
Yeah,
I,
great. Well, that's fine. We missed you. We've all missed you, but it's good to have you back.
yeah, and I was saying so many good things too.
I know you were right in the middle, and I kind of summarized what you were saying
Okay,
about
good.
taking responsibility. And taking responsibility means knowing your feelings, and it's okay.
Right.
A lot of high producers, a lot of high achievers, one of the ways they got there was they weren't wasting any of their energy, and I'm being sarcastic, on these pesky little things called emotions. And that's how
Right.
they were able to work 12, 14 hours a day and climb to the top. Now that they're at the top, they're not effective because they're not in touch with their feelings. They don't realize how there's a wake of destruction behind them. So step
Hmm.
one, right?
Yeah.
How do you help corporate people like do the
Yeah.
feeling awareness thing? I mean, in therapy, I do weird stuff, but you can't do
Yeah.
that in corporation.
No, but I could pretend like I'm a psychologist, but I'm not. So,
And I
yeah.
pretend I'm a consultant, but I'm not. So it's
There you
fine.
go. Well, so something's real basic. So sometimes if I ask them to put their hand on their gut and say, what are you
Yeah.
feeling right now?
Yeah.
Because some of us are wired where we're very instinctual. So we can
Mhm.
feel the anger in our gut and say, like, what, there it is. My blood pressure's going up. I'm starting to get annoyed. To actually feel the anger and acknowledge it, embrace it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And therefore be in the process to say, if I can acknowledge that, now I don't have to react. I can pause, take a breath,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
respond. It sounds
Mhm.
so simple, and yet it is at the core of what we're really talking about here. And
Yeah.
so begin to notice those times. And one person said to me, but I've been like reacting for my entire life, and my entire family reacts. I said, right. So you're going to have to literally train the neuron, the synapses in your brain to respond differently.
Mhm.
Welcome to life. Hello.
Yeah.
And I had to do that because I was a reactor. I never really thought about my emotions.
Mhm.
You punched, I counter punched.
Yeah.
So it's literally realizing, what am I feeling? Pause, take a deep breath. What's the
Yeah.
truth? I'm okay. Now
Yeah.
let's deal with that. And so
Absolutely.
it's really, that's the first step of mindfulness. In fact, it was funny because you had talked about a breathing that you're going to do, I think, here. And
Yeah.
I had asked this person, try this breath thing, because Tim's going to practice it this afternoon. So go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
No, and let me say something before I practice that with you, which is that you're talking about how do you change your state? And we tend to think of all this going on up here when for most of us, this is not the problem. You might notice this, that in the middle of all this stress, if you're at home and your kids are home and your partner's home, a little side note, funny thing, many years ago, I heard a guy who was married 65 years. They interviewed him on the news. They said, wow, 65 years of marriage. What has been your secret? And he said, well, we spend a lot of time apart, take separate vacation. And so when we're together, we enjoy each other, but we don't spend that much time together, which wasn't at all what they were looking for on their
Right.
Valentine's
Yeah.
Day special on Channel 7. But it was quite funny. And it was pointing to the reality that for relationships to thrive, we need to spend some time apart and some time together. But what happens when we're getting stressed out is not just up here, the stress hormones get released into our body. So our body thinks something bad is about to happen. And so our body is, and you might notice it, sending little trickles of adrenaline and stress.
Mhm.
And so, and it goes into our shoulders and arms, and sometimes into our legs, definitely into our belly, preparing us to run or to fight or whatever. And that doesn't go away. So deep breaths help, and they help a lot. In fact, I use deep breaths throughout the day. And we're going to practice a deep breath exercise here in a second. But like I found, for example, my physical movement, I used to, do yoga once a day, an hour of practice, which was great. I found now I do about 20 minutes of yoga and about 40 minutes of lifting weights and hitting a punching bag because I have so much stress in my body. I need to explode out of my muscles and burn up all that adrenaline. So that's super helpful. I'd say one other thing, which is people are saying, oh, I take one walk a day. And I would say, rather than one long walk a day, maybe break up your day and take 3 short walks a day, because this stuff is trickling into your muscles. And while you're walking, look around and swing your arms around and, do this, like really get your whole body engaged so that you can release it.
So it's interesting because there was one time I was coaching a guy and I said, do you notice in the middle of a meeting when you start to get really ramped? He goes, oh yeah. I said, okay, I want you to practice this.
Yeah.
Stand up.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? Well, you want to get your blood moving through your body. And I said, so just stand up, walk around. And if people ask what you're doing, just say, I'm standing right now because I need to.
Yeah.
And I said, and if it's really bad, get up and go to the bathroom. And he said, well, I might not have to. No, you need to.
Exactly.
You need to go to the
Absolutely.
bathroom.
No,
And come back. Yeah.
You do, because you need to stop that triggering of stress hormones through your body, because if you can't change your state, there's no way you can be sensitive to other people. Because remember, this part of your brain, this is your love center, man. The limbic system, the amygdala, that's your love center. And if it's scanning for threat and feeling upset, you can fake it, but people are going to know you're faking it. I mean, they might appreciate your good intention, but they're not going to feel love.
No.
So, any kind of deep breath. I mean, the easiest is to just put your hand on your belly, and when you breathe in, allow the muscles around your belly to soften and then expand when you breathe in. And so let's do this one. This is real easy. It's called 4-7-8 breath. Put your hand on your belly. We're going to breathe into a count of 4. We're going to hold it to a count of 7. And then we're going to exhale to a count of 8. And when we exhale, we're going to push that air out through our lips with some force. So it's going to be like this. To a count of 8. You want to really feel the pressure. Okay. We'll do this just one time. Ready? So let's go ahead and take a normal breath. And then we'll inhale. Hold for 7. And then exhale to a count of 8. And then I would coach you to, take a couple of normal breaths and then do it again. That's a breathing exercise you could do as much as you want. And I find myself doing that. If I'm in a stressful meeting, or if I, getting lightheaded, like anxious with someone, not sure what to do next, I'll do that belly breathing, forceful inhale, hold, slow exhale. And my brain comes back online. My limbic system starts settling. The other one is a little more energetic.
Real quick before we go there, what strikes me is that I run across very smart people who say, oh no, I can just think my way through this. And you're saying, if I'm hearing you correct, it's biological. Why fight biology, right?
Yeah. because people will sense that you're saying the right thing and doing the right thing. But remember, we are so connected. Our bodies are connected.
Mm.
One of the things I love showing couples in the room, I love showing them on a videotape where the spouse will say, "I love you," and and then they don't understand why their spouse like blows up at them or
Yeah.
F-bombs them, and they're like, it doesn't make sense. All I said is I love you. And then we kind of roll it back and I say, now I want you to look at your face without any sound. And what is your face saying?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not saying I love you.
Yeah.
And
Oops.
that's what
Yeah.
our bodies pick that stuff up.
Remember me to never go to counseling with you. Okay, good.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if you want to be in marriage counseling for a really long time, don't come to me.
Okay.
Because we're gonna find out what the issue is really quickly, and then you're gonna be ready to leave. So
All right. So go ahead. Do your bellow fist.
well, here's the other thing, and there's a lot of different names for this. The way I was trained in it, it's called bellows breath. And what we're going to do is you're going to put your hands like this. And if you feel like doing this, great. If you don't, that's fine. You can practice it later. But you're going to start like this, and you're going to inhale by put your arms over your head like this. And then you're going to exhale really forcefully, pulling down like this. All right.
All right.
And we do 10 at a time. Take a little break, and then another 10. We'll just do 10 here. Okay. So if you're feeling like you want to do this, let's do this together. Ready? Right. Inhale. 2 more. And then go ahead and let your hands rest on your lap just for a moment. Let your eyes close. Take a normal breath and just notice what's happening. When you do this, especially if you then repeat a second round of 10 and another round of 10, something really cool happens, which is when they measure blood pressure for people, they notice blood pressure initially goes up just a little bit, but then it almost always drops much lower after you do bellows breath. So it's a great way to feel both energized and grounded. And so again, one of the things I'll do in the morning when I'm not awake and I want to have a good meditation time, I'll always do bellows breath to get me going. Or when I'm done at the end of the day, that'll be my way of releasing the tension of the day. I'll do 3 rounds of bellows breath before I open the door and rejoin the family. And it really does clear the energy, and I'm not carrying that, all that stuff underneath.
Does your family ever say to you, will you please go out in the garage and do some more bellows breath for us?
No, I haven't. I don't do a lot of bellows breath with them. So
that's good.
So Mark, I'm thinking about, you've certainly worked with enough businesses that are going through really, really tough times. I know you've been there as they've had, high level people die suddenly, and you do work with companies in that situation. Yep. And when people have this tendency to be cynical or negative or hopeless, I mean, I'm thinking about things that you've done. What kind of stuff do you find helpful, as you step in and, and sense that there is kind of this negative loop? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that we always encourage leaders to do is to define reality. Mm-hmm. And that sounds kind of odd, but bear with me. So it's the leader's job to define reality. And by that, I mean, what's really going on here?
Nice.
So I see it, but what's really happening? Sometimes business will call that, what's the real issue, right? And so if we can define what's really happening, then we can talk about what we're feeling, what we're noticing, what is the impact, what's really going on, and then how to take a step forward.
Yeah.
So for instance, this quote that I started with today, we're all experiencing the collective loss of the world we knew. I was with a team virtually a couple weeks ago, and we were on a Zoom call for literally 5 hours, ironically. And we started the meeting that way. I said, we all got, this is a tough time right now, really surreal. I'd like you to respond with me to the quote, we are all experiencing a collective loss of the world we knew. 45 minutes, that was the discussion.
Wow.
And we talked about the impact for them personally, professionally, how they were navigating something new, how the salespeople have to do something completely different, how customer service has to respond in a different way. How do you keep your people safe and at the office as well as when they're on the field? And then it was very interesting. One of the people said, my husband died a year ago, and this feels a lot like it did a year ago. It feels like grief. And I think so many times we get into business and organizations, we're like, oh, okay. But in that moment, we're all just say it is grief. Right.
Yeah.
We are
Oh,
all
for sure.
experiencing a level of grief right now, and that is what's going on. It's the
Yeah.
reality. And
Yeah.
therefore, you got to acknowledge rather than run from it, let's acknowledge it. That 45 minutes was golden then to the rest of the discussion, and we could be productive the rest of the time. But we had to acknowledge that.
Oh
And
man,
it's
that's so
and
good. Yeah.
yeah, Dan Walker just wrote down, it is really hard to do. It really is to acknowledge reality because we don't want to do that. We don't want to acknowledge a reality. We'd rather run from it. We'd rather make it up. We'd rather just say, oh, that person's got an issue or that person's got an issue. What is really going on here? And it sometimes
Absolutely.
takes a number of passes. All right. It's
Yeah.
almost like the five whys. What's really happening? Well, this. No, what's really happening? What's really happening? Oh,
Yeah.
by the fifth time, it's like, okay, I think we got what's really happening here.
Oh man, that's so good. And that whole thing. So you're saying it's important for leaders to define reality. And if you step into your meeting and reality is all of us are struggling through something, the kind of epic worldwide crisis that happens no more than once every 100 years or so. And we're right in the middle of it. So to start your meeting without that, and I know someone I just love, a pastor that I just love, has done that. Every time they have a meeting, other people are like, all right, what are we going to do? And she says, no, wait. I want 2 minutes from everyone. Where's your heart? How are you? What's going on
Mm.
with you? Because funny, I tell you this story. As you know, that last year was one of the rougher years for me. And, with Karen getting real sick and being diagnosed with cancer and having pretty difficult treatment. And then leaving that ministry I'd been in for 24 years. And there were a few other things too that was really difficult, and had this really funny thing. So I went on this 5-day retreat, silent retreat, had a great director, just a wonderful older guy that knew what he was doing. And I walked in the first day and he said, so what do you want to get out of this? And I said, well, I brought my binder with me. And I said, I have mission statement, values and objectives and all the provision, priorities, projects, all that. But, it's really changed a lot since I left this nonprofit. So I really want to redo that this week. Like I want to rewrite my mission statement, get clear about my values, figure out. And he said, okay, so tell me what else is going on. I told him about Karen and, the other stuff and then the ministry and all that. So I said, so can we get to work? And he said, oh no, we're not doing that stuff. We're going to give you space to grieve. And he said, this is what I want you to do. And he basically said, I want you to just go in the chapel. I want you to get out your journal. And he actually did this, from a Christian point. He said, look at Jesus on the cross, look at the suffering. And I want you to engage your suffering and just enter into your suffering for a little bit and write your journal. And I said, all right, I'll do that today, thinking by tomorrow we'll get to the mission statement. Then I'm walking out the door and he doesn't even know me. Like, this is my first meeting with this guy.
Yeah.
And as I'm about to leave, he says, hey, Tim. So I said, man, you don't look so good. He said, you might want to sleep. It's okay to sleep. So I went into the chapel. I journaled for like 40 minutes, started weeping, went into my room and slept the rest of the day, which is something I've never done.
Right.
But what he was able to spot is if you jump to problem solving, and you and I, Mark, we're saying we want this webinar to be really helpful because we're now going to start coming out of this thing. We're going to start spending more time at the office, but it's going to be an in-between. We're going to be in this in-between season. So what are the key skills to really be emotionally smart, relationally smart, and strategic and effective as we go through this middle season, which is the part on, part off, assuming we won't be full back on until a year from now or more. And the first thing that you and I keep saying is, man, number one, you better name reality well. You better grieve. If this is super hard for you, you're never going to get work done until you give your people space to grieve.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I know I was in a funk a couple of weeks ago, and and I was trying to ask, like, what am I doing? What's really going on? Jenny just asked a question: how do you know if and when I'm moving through grief or out of grief? And I think that's what I was noticing at that point. I was, am I in it? Am I out of it? Am I almost out of it? Like, how do I push the process? Because I really like grief. It sucks, and I do this for a living, so I should really move quickly. Crud. So how do you know when and if you're moving out of grief?
Well, and grief is complicated, isn't it? I mean, we know, Kubler-Ross gave us, 6 stages, we fight, we go into denial, we get depressed, we bargain, so it's hard. Sometimes it's not easy to know. Like, we may think we're out of grief when in fact we're just in denial. Or, what I found with grief is, grief is never fully goes away, right? Like you can do most of it, but um, funny little story. I was at went to with my mom to a funeral of someone I didn't even know, like a friend of hers. And she didn't even know this guy, the husband that died. So I go to this funeral and I hear them talking about this guy. And truth is, he doesn't sound like the kind of guy I would care to have a beer with. He's just not my type. He's
Right.
just, I mean, I know you're not supposed to say that after people die, you're only supposed to say good things. So I'm breaking a social rule. I fully get that. But that's the way it was. Well, as they're talking about him, I start getting filled with tears and I start to weep. And my mom puts her hand on my shoulder and says, "You're so sweet, Tim," because she thought I was grieving with this family for the loss of their dad. Not at all. I was thinking about my own grief and just the grief of Karen's illness and that, that thought of the potential for death, which is always lingering in our house. And just the thought of that just does me in. And then some other things too that had come up because that funeral home was a trigger for me for a good friend that had died a couple years ago. So, but the point is, we need to be, I think the way we handle grief is every day. I like to say to myself, there you are. How's my grieving heart doing? Because we're losing stuff every day, and just check in with it, and be okay that some days you're totally out of grief, and then other days for no good reason you just find yourself back in it, and you just need to say to that part of you, "I love you. I'm here. I'm listening." I often say it's like putting your arm around a little kid and just saying, "We'll do this day together. We'll just carry this. We'll do life today with a little more grief than usual," and then.
Yeah.
So I don't know that really answers the question, but that's how I handle it.
Well, what I'm hearing is you're letting it come when it comes.
Yes.
And I think we tend to think if we've accomplishment, I've graduated from the grief.
Yes.
So, check that box off. I got an A and now I can move on.
Yep.
And what you're saying is use the word trigger. I could go into a funeral home and all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, that feels familiar. Or
Yeah.
like the gal in our meeting, that feels like when my husband died.
Yeah.
And again, not to run from that, but that's what's happening.
Yes.
Certainly it's been a year for her, but right now this feels the same, and to acknowledge
Yeah.
that reality.
And if I can say one other thing, yes, absolutely. And there is such a thing as people getting stuck
Right.
in their grief. And you and I talk a lot about, there are people who are stuck. There are people who are essentially stuck on the couch right now, unable to move. They're not able to parent particularly well or work particularly well, which is fine. That's part of the process. But how do you get unstuck? And so could I just be real practical with this?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Is that I think if you have grief, I think it's helpful to, when you have some time, make yourself a cup of good tea or coffee and just journal. Like, where am I right now with the loss of, my best friend from many years ago, or where am I with the loss of my dad, and just to write. And then when you notice where it is in your body, here's the mistake that's easy to make. People then just sit.
Right.
And you'll notice this. They tend to kind of stare in one direction and they just kind of sip their coffee like, "Oh, this is so sad." That makes it worse.
Great.
What you need to do is, if you're feeling the grief, to massage your brain with it, to look to the right and look to the left, and even do some tapping where you just kind of put your fingers up above your eyes and just kind of tap, or down here, tap. Just keep your brain massaged. Go for a walk. Do some deep breathing. Do some singing and humming. So if you, by moving and processing, it helps the grief to digest. It helps you. Otherwise, I mean, literally on a brain scan, if you just kind of freeze up and just get sad, and some people do that and they call it meditation. It's not meditation.
No.
It's just ruminating about your loss.
Yeah, that's now, I used that word at the beginning. Rumination is so bad for you because it does keep you stuck. And when we even talk about noticing your emotions, embracing them, working through them, we're not talking about ruminating. We're not talking about wallowing in them. So, hey, there's a question that came up that maybe we can answer now, maybe not. Is reality defined by our perceptions? If so, how do we define a true reality, given that our perceptions may sometimes be impacted by our emotions, which we know are fickle and fluid? Any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, one thought that a really brilliant executive coach that I know. Oh, it's you.
Thanks. Thank
No,
you.
I mean, one of the things we talk about is, our brains are bombarded by tens of thousands of bits of information every second, depending on how rich of a stimulus environment we're in. But we can only process a few dozen bits at a time.
Right.
So, when you talk about defining reality, if I think there's a thing called cognitive priming, which is the training. We train and prime our brain what to look for. You know, you can walk into a church service and it can be just awful. The music can be terrible. The preaching can be the worst, but you might leave and just say, I couldn't get over the beautiful architecture of that building. I mean, that's all I could think of was the architecture, because you're training yourself to look at reality. Now, that doesn't take away the other stuff, but it does. So I think there's this tension between, you know, what I think you're getting at, which is trying to create reality that's not true. And then also knowing that we can, the biggest choice we have as we define reality is guiding the people who work for us and showing them what we want them to look at, right? Like, because you find what you look for.
Yeah. Somebody just wrote in the chat, if you look at it, but you know, the last couple sentences where it's reconciling the need for safety and security with uncertainty. Let's almost have the balance, right? Not just what we have lost, but what else might we lose? And I think, you know, even, I mean, I fall in that category. I'm over 60 and thinking, man, if I get it, I'm at the at-risk stage. So, you know, I find myself, no, I'm fine, but what if I get it? Yeah.
Isn't that something? And so, man, what a great observation and great question. So what do you do with that? And because, for example, for you, you've been very smart. You've been staying home.
Right.
You've been not putting yourself in a situation because you can't afford to. And I mean, that's true for everyone, but you know, it's kind of sad when they start describing the at-risk group and you're like, oh yeah, those old people. And then you're like, wait,
oops.
Oh, that's me.
Right. It is.
Talk about grief. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So isn't this kind of, you know, I've been thinking about this as kind of walking with both legs, and the one leg is that's part of what makes this so hard. And it's part of why our brain can't settle. It's not like responding from a hurricane. You know, I've been reading research about what happened to people after Hurricane Hugo, which was hugely disruptive, took months before people got their life together. But the difference is the hurricane was over.
Right.
Everybody knew that eventually it was going to get better. And whereas for us now, we don't know. And the other thing with Hugo is the whole world was pouring love on them because the Hugo only hit one swath of the United States. There's no one coming for us, right? I mean, it's hitting everywhere, and we know that. And so we're kind of caught in this. This is not acute. This is a chronic thing. And so absolutely. So one hand, holding on to our grief. This is hard. This is scary. Looking it in the eye, having the nobility to look reality in the eye, breathe deep, you know, and say, I will live in reality, and I will choose to pick things that I'm grateful for. I will notice the good things, that I still live in a climate controlled building, and I still, you know, I still have working plumbing, and I still have enough money to buy food, and I have good friends, you know, and
and I like that. You know, Patrick Davidson just wrote, isn't that the reality we're in right now? Absolutely. So you have to wake up. It's day 38. Here we are. And it is what it is. That's the reality I'm in. I'm limited. Now what? But I acknowledge the reality, and then I can say, now what am I grateful for? And how can I move through that? And practicing gratitude. The fact that I didn't get it, I'm alive. No family members, you know, in my close family got it, or whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah, for
like
sure.
My daughter and son-in-law are ER nurses. They face this every day. So, you know, we're like, oh boy, they're going to work today. Time out. It is what it is. They've dedicated themselves to this. Your daughter is on the front lines in Chicago.
She is.
And so it's just saying, okay, that's the reality, and we're facing it with them, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I got to tell you, I mean, that you're right. That's personal, because Megan works in the ICU, all COVID patients now. Just looking at her face, you can see the death. I mean, she hasn't had to use body bags ever before like she is now. And then my sister's on the front lines. I was on the phone with her today. Like there's a lot of pain, and there's a part of me that says, I don't have energy to absorb this pain. I got my own pain. But you were talking about defining reality, and you and I talked recently about all of the great movies that that you and I both love.
Right.
They all have this thing in common where, like, a good person is plucked out of the normal rhythm of their life and dropped into a new place. You know, whether that's Band of Brothers or Gladiator or the Chronicles of Narnia series. I mean, really just about any movie. And the question is, now that you've been plucked out of the comfort and the rhythm of your own life, now what are you going to do?
Yeah. Good. Keep going.
No, you go. Yeah.
Well, you know, the back cover of my book says everyone is worth the dignity of their story. And you and I know, you know, the importance of story. And if you've done any research about how good stories are written from Pixar to all the Hollywood greats that we love today, every good story has a hero,
Yeah.
and that hero faces something challenging, and there's a protagonist that keeps the hero from achieving the goal that they want, and then there's a guide that comes along and guides them through it, and in the end it's like, oh, they've achieved. And when
Mm.
my friend Matt Emhoff and I do story days with people, where we have people actually come for a day and spend time with us, you know, working through their story, we ask them at the end of the day, who's the hero of your story?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit off-putting because people don't like to say I am. They're like, I don't know. Like, no, we just
Yeah.
spent a whole day with you. But think about it for a moment. If you believe, I mean, even if whether you believe in God or not, um, if you are the hero of your story, you write the next chapter.
Yeah.
You can find the guide. You can face the protagonist. You can
Yes.
make it through the valley. You can take the next steps. You have a
Hmm.
choice and a responsibility in the matter. And I
Yeah.
think that is absolutely true. You know,
Oh
even if
boy.
you're
Yeah.
facing super challenges, makes sense.
Oh man. Well, and it reminds me, I was rereading recently Viktor Frankl's
Mhm.
work on Man's Search for Meaning. He talked about, being in the concentration camps where talk about no hope. I mean, we are struggling to have hope right now, but,
Right.
and he said it dawned on him that even there were men who were taking their small portion of bread and walking through the cabin and giving pieces to the men that looked more sick than them if they
That
felt
crazy.
like they were
Yeah.
strong. So we always have that choice to pick up our pen, turn the page, and write a new chapter. And I think that's true for all of us. And one way I think about this is a little mind trick I play with myself. And sometimes when I'm with a couple, I tell them the story, which is probably completely unethical, but whatever. I say, by the way, um, you stopped coming to me. This is our second path through life. You may not know that, but your first path through life, you just stopped coming to me, and your marriage sucked, and you lived it out for the rest of your days, and everyone around you was miserable, and you were miserable. But then when we got to heaven, we met at a cocktail party, and an angel said, "You guys want to go back to 2020 and do a separate version of your life?" And you said yes, and I agreed. So we're back. This is your second trip through life. So you can stay on
Okay.
this path of having a terrible marriage, or you can, starting today, put your stake in the ground and say,
Ooh.
I am changing this story. I am starting a new chapter of this novel, and it's going to be better. And I think that's true for us. Like, it makes sense that we might want to stay in bed, covers pulled over our head, and just survive. Um,
Yeah.
but it's funny. After Hugo, one of the things they found is that two things spiked after Hugo. Uh, Divorces spiked when
Yeah.
once the attorney's offices opened, people went and filed for divorce, which, by the way, they're finding in China right now. Divorces spiked. But what they found after Hugo was marriages spiked, and there was a baby boom after that.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, whatever you're going to do, it's going to be intense. So why don't you just make it big? Go big or go home. You
That's
have
funny.
a chance to
Yeah.
use all this to become a better leader, servant leader than you've ever been to your family and to
Yeah.
your friends. And so
Wow. It's so
you're
interesting
free.
you're using Hugo, because I lived through Hurricane Andrew
Oh
in
yeah.
South Florida in 1992. And so I
Mm-hmm.
knew it was like preparing during, we were just north of Miami, and then after.
Wow.
And you're right. Afterwards, it was a whole different feel. I mean,
Mm.
people were talking to one another. We were commenting. We were, people were engaging in a whole different way because, like, whoo, we survived, right?
Yes.
And so it'll be very interesting to see what that looks like for us. Hey,
But
I want
don't
to
you
jump.
find? Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead. No. Yeah.
I was
Let's
going to
jump.
jump back to Dan Walker's question. Can you
Yeah.
speak to the difference between reacting and responding? Whew, I like that.
It's a
I'll
great
give the
question.
layman's version, and you can give the real neuro, whatever you call it. What are you again?
Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
the
Yeah.
professional, right?
It's just
So
yeah.
we're triggered, okay? And whenever there's a trigger, okay, to react is to give an equal response. I'm triggered, boom, I'm going to give a quick response back. There's not much thought to it. It's very reactive. We just let them have it, or we just give them what we can at that moment. To respond, you can explain why this happens, Tim, is to have it happen. Ooh, pause, awareness, whatever that piece looks like, and then to respond. So why does that matter? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you're essentially describing is the pause between stimulus and response.
Ah,
And the
got it.
question is, can you get creative pausing when someone says something and then just engaging that upper part of our brain and doing something creative. I think of my mentor, Stan Tatkin, who is just a guru of a therapist. And, he'd show us a film of one of his sessions, and someone would say, the wife would say, I saw the emails, I hired a PI, and I can see that you've been having an affair for 3 years. And Stan would say to the wife, what do you think of the color of that shirt on him? Do you think that matches with his eyes? Or do you, and we all were like, oh, is he buying time or whatever? And
Right.
his point was, no, that kind of explosive statement is about to start a reactive pattern. And his mind is, I do not allow reactivity in my session. And so I'm showing people that they can keep, you can turn gears and focus on something else, then turn your gears and focus on something else. And I think that's what it takes. I mean, it reminds me of that itinerant preacher we both have a fondness for. People would say, hey, what do you say, this or that? And he would say, well, two guys walk into a bar. And and
Right.
feel like, wait, why is he telling this story about a dad and his son? I just asked him a very specific question about the law. And I think that's what we have to be. We have to really tap our creativity. Otherwise, we're going to react. Because even when we think we're not reacting, I like to say, well, one thing I'm not going to say to that is, to which my wife and kids say, you just said it, Dad.
Right. Exactly. Thank you.
That's the reactive, right?
That's
so
the key.
responding requires some kind of creative, playful way. And it just means we shift our attention and focus on something else for a moment.
Yeah.
That's good. I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh, I think that's really good. Really good. Awesome. So it's interesting. It strikes me why when I was in my funk, that's when I binge watched Ozark. Because it's kind of a dark thing. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to be dark for this weekend. And I binge watched Ozark and I was all done. I'm like, okay, well, it was Ozark. It didn't really satisfy me, but it helped. I was in the dark place and then I could walk out. Right. So.
Yeah. No, and here's what I say. And I've been doing this to myself. Because look, I've had my days of complete non-productivity, complete binge watching. I know more about the recruiting world in college football right now than it is the most embarrassing thing how much I know about the lives of 17-year-old boys who are trying to think about where they're going to go to school. This is confession time. So I'd like an absolution before this is over.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, but so we get, and I've talked to leaders, huge leaders, like running multi-minute, and they're saying, I just watched YouTube videos for 3 hours when I've got financials that my board is waiting for me. And it's like, I get it. Yeah. One of the things that I often do, and this may be a little technique for how do we do this, how do we engage is, I grab my phone and I set the timer. I'll just say, I don't want to say it because then Siri will talk back to me, but hey, Siri, set the timer for 20 minutes. And then I give myself 20 minutes to just do whatever, to lay in bed. If I'm laying in bed, I'll just pull the covers over my head and just say, I'm not getting up today. I'm not facing it. But then when that alarm goes off, it can work. So yeah.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
So, as we're thinking about this, one of the things you and I talked about yesterday is, what are the rhythms and routines that we could kind of put in our life? We're talking about the path out, okay? And I know that we're this in-between stage. I think it's really cool to acknowledge that reality, that we're in it, that we're kind of moving through it, and now we're moving out of it, but not fully out of it. And so, what are some of the things that we can remember? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's big. And there's no question we'll have to really pick that up as a main theme starting next week, right? I mean, that's big. Because we are saying this, we're not just here to say things are bad, we get it, so you turn off the webinar and feel encouraged. Like there's a whole bunch of that out there. We're talking about how you move forward. And can I just say this, Mark, like where we started and just bring this back to here, and I think that'll lead to the next obvious step. I think, well, the first thing we said is like, what's going on? And what we said is what's going on is we're having a full brain, full nervous system reaction to this. We are scanning for threat, which makes us less loving, which makes us more on edge, which makes us, less affectionate than we probably would like to be going through something like this. And that's just reality. That we can't control that. There are so many triggers for fear and threat right now that our limbic system is exhausted. So that's the first thing. But then I think you said, okay, so that's reality. What do leaders do? They name reality. They realize they're in a story. They say, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. So what do we got to do? Well, number one, we got to find a way to change our mind state. We got to find a way to see that even though things are really tough, there's still that freedom to look at reality and pick what I'm going to focus on, and then be that kind of leader, be the kind of leader, like you said, who starts a meeting, the Zoom meeting, with, hey, let's check in with everyone, how you're doing. Let's call, let's name some feeling words. Let me tell you how I've been feeling lately, right? Like, that's what it means to be a leader, because we can choose to look at the positive, and
Hmm.
we can embrace the fact that we're in a story, and the story is, in this story, we get to write a new chapter. So we really can envision and dream how we're going to get through this. I love something you said a minute ago, which is, what's it going to be like? And this is where we're headed now, right? Like, what's the next step? How do we start routines? Well, one of the things I think we can count on is we are going to really appreciate each other more. I know I go for a bike ride through Plymouth, and I'm telling you, everyone is like, hi,
Yeah.
hi. Like, I mean, last summer you'd walk and people would be like annoyed that you're driving through
Yeah.
their neighborhood with their
Right.
$1 million homes. Now they see you as like a savior who's come to bring human presence into them. And I think it's going to be like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, when we can start meeting for coffee and breakfast again, we're going to
Yeah.
feel this kinship with everyone who survived. So I think that's where the story is headed. And now
Yeah.
we get to find ways.
Yeah.
So, you were saying, what about routines? I think one of the things we have to be able to do now is not be frozen. Our brain, we always say fight or flight, but the truth is we freeze and then fight or flight.
Okay.
And so when the brain is under stress, we always freeze first. That we
Okay.
can't not freeze first. And so a lot of us are going in and out of the freeze mode.
Okay.
And the way we get out of that is we have to find some way to create rhythms and routines to our life. I think that's where you're going. And I think that's huge. I think I spend a lot of my time coaching people on how do you create some rhythms and routines that will allow you to not feel as stressed out as you are at the end of the day. That's kind of what, right?
Yeah.
Is that where you were headed?
Well, and you hear that a lot. Are you getting up, in the morning? Are you brush your teeth, taking a shower, putting on a new pair of jammies, or whatever that looks like?
Right. Yeah.
And what is your rhythm, right? And I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people that are home, especially parents who have younger children, just
Oh,
got
man.
their assignments, and so now they had a routine, and now the routine is even more crazy because they got to start doing homework at different levels with their kids, or
Oh, man.
or you've got 5 people on a Zoom at the same house, so you don't have enough internet speed, and
Yeah.
how do you work through all that?
Man, and that is, well, and here's, okay, let's go through our process. You start by naming reality. And
There you
what's
go.
reality? For some people, like my sister and my daughter, they wake up every morning and go deal with people who are dying. And so that's their reality. Other people, I think, have a very difficult reality. They're at home
Right.
trying to do work by Zoom, which, by the way, you and I talked
This
about
is
the
really
research.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to mention that research?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yesterday?
You're the one who did it. Yep. Go ahead.
Well, it just because normally when if I'm sitting with someone, our bodies are exchanging energy and information. And when we are with people in person, it's a reciprocal thing, meaning we're giving each other energy. I'm receiving your energy. You're getting my energy. And so a lot of times, even when I'm working hard with people, they leave and I'm energized because now we're doing this by screen. So you can't see the rest of me. Now, the truth is I do have pants on, which is always the question. But I people always say that. Like,
it is always the question. Okay, got it.
Maybe when you're back at the bar, that's the question. No, but
All right.
the question is, like, because the point is you can't see my whole body. So you're not getting as much energy and information. We're not feeling each other's vibe as much. And so what many people are experiencing, this is the research you were reading, that people are feeling exhausted at the end of a day filled with Zoom meetings. So this is more tiring. Now you add, I got to, in between Zoom meetings, go down because the teacher sent my 4th grader a packet of information that has 7 hours, and a 4th grader doesn't have the self-regulation skills to do it, and yet the teacher's expecting that they do it. Everybody's stressed. The 4th grader can't do it because all that human reciprocal energy from the classroom, which is what allows them to get their work done, is missing. And so the reality is people are saying, I just can't do it. So step 1, acknowledge reality. No, you can't. And so we'll spend more time on this next week, but maybe between now and then you might want to think about where are the stuck points in your daily rhythms, because there is a way of, cataloging all the things that need to get done, having a process to identify priorities, and then really sticking with your priorities. In the same way, looking at your day from the time you wake up till the time you go to sleep, kind of what what pieces need to happen for that day to be effective, and then how do you create that, and then how do you communicate that to your kids if they're in school, or
Oh,
how
it's
do you work
good.
that out with your partner if you're living with someone. So yeah.
Good. So, Tim, I'm going to give some basic information. There's a question just came up. We may or may not be able to answer it now, but here's the deal. We're going to come back next week, and we're having a lot of fun. I'm not sure if you guys are or not, but this is what we do when we go out for coffee. So if you guys want to get a hold of us, just go to, an email Tim or myself. It's real easy, Tim at drtimhogan.com or Mark at thechoicesshowup.com. We'll read those questions and come back and talk about it again. We have some more things to share, but we also want to make sure that we can help you guys too. So next Thursday we'll be back here for the second part of a different seminar. So can we answer this one real quick? And again, if you shouldn't have to sign up again, you should have signed up and it was one sign up. So we should be okay. The way we set it up, if I did it correctly, was reoccurring. You should be able to just log on next week. So, all right, can we do this in a 2 minutes here or not? And
Sure.
that's
What was
the question on COVID? How do we navigate the new COVID-19 social distancing norm to ensure we're still able to exchange with one another, especially positive energy? Yeah.
No, I think, well, I'll tell you a few things I've done, and I'll think more about that before next week. One of the bonuses I've done is I have reached out to the people in my life, and I've been having Zoom meetings with them, or I've been meeting over FaceTime, whereas normally it'd be by phone.
Right.
So, we've had a thing in our tradition, it's a religious tradition in our family called happy hour. And we've had happy hours with my mom and with some friends.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, so that's nice. So we can see each other's face. So there is still an exchange of energy and information. We have also gotten this thing in our neighborhood where we all come out at 7 at night, and whoever comes out, and we stand about 12 feet away, and we just share in ways that we never shared before COVID. So let's really hit that hard next week. We'll talk about strategies to be intentional about exchanging energy and information. And you know what? If you're living at home with people, you're not social distancing because you're living, in the same space. Be mindful of how much are you hugging. You might be avoiding nurturing behavior with each other because your limbic system's activated for stress.
Yep.
You might need to be intentional about saying, hey, if you have a partner, to let that hug go for 10 or 15 seconds so that your limbic system can calm and it can switch gears and realize attachment is what we're made for. And that will be so good for your immune system and everything else.
That's really good. And I just want to honor my wife. She does that for me in the morning. And at first it was like, now I'm like, I take it in, man. I am just soaking that up because that 20 seconds is so worthwhile. Hey, this has been fun. Thanks, buddy. It's been great. We'll see you guys next time. All right.
Sounds great.